How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem, Daf 40 of Masechta Zevachim, friends. On Daf 40, there are basically, I'd say, two main sections. Section number 1 being the 4 required bloods for inner chatas. Of course, we've been discussing the different korban chatases, different korbanos in general in Perek Beis Shammai in the 4th Perek of Masechta Zevachim, but we moved on to kind of talking about general korbanos and getting more specific on korban chatases, inner korban chatases and outer korban chatases. Today, we are going to be discussing, on the first part at least of the daf, the inner chatas and the matan damim, the 4 applications of blood for the inner chatas. They are all required. You must do all 4 of them. And we're going to discuss the source for how we know that all 4 must be done. That is going to be section number 1 of today's daf. Section number 2 is the Yom Kippur cow requirements. We for the second part of the daf, and it's also going to be coming up on subsequent dafs, we will be discussing the par in Yom Kippur. Of course, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, as part of the avodah, he does is par chatas asher lo, and then there's the sira chatas asher lo. So we will be discussing the Yom Kippur cow of the Kohen Gadol and the halachas around that and how they relate to chatas apnimios, like the par davar shel tzibur, the par Kohen Mashiach. That is going to be what we have in store for Daf Mem, Daf 40 of Masechta Zevachim. Let us jump in. Friends, we are going to begin on Daf Mem Amid Aleph of Masechta Zevachim, all the way at the top of the Daf Omer Mar. We said at the end of the Daf yesterday, actually the truth is, this was, I think, actually, what's actually? Actually, at the bottom of Daf Lamed Tes Omid Aleph, but we said, so we had said at the bottom of Lamed Tes Omid Aleph. Let me actually read that brisa quickly with your permission. And Daf Lamed Tes Omid Aleph, about 5-6 lines from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanan, the Rabbi started the 2 dots. Ve'oso kasher also ma ba li lamed lichbo baza also. Basically, when it says by the par elim davar shel tzibur, I think we had mentioned this yesterday. Again, I don't remember what's on what day anymore. Maybe this is going to be a permanent thing. Maybe just forever. I just won't be able to remember anything. Al koponim, when we look at the 4th chapter of Sefer Vayikra, we will first encounter the par Kohen Mashiach. After that, we will encounter the par helim davar shel tzibur, and by the par helim davar shel tzibur, it says v'asa kasher also, and you'll do by the par helim davar shel tzibur like you did by the par Kohen Mashiach. So the question was, why does it have to say that? Right? V'asa kasher also, how come it has to say, and you're going to do like you did for the par Kohen Mashiach? Because after all, by the par helim davar shel tzibur, it also says all the things they have to do, the matan damim and the smicha and all those kinds of things. So what? Why is it? And you'll do the same thing. I mean, we already listed all the things you have to do. So the point is, it says that it's to double down on the azos, right? Lichbo ba'aza also to double down on the matan damim. To say that if the palim davar shel tzibur is lacking any of the matan damim, any of the applications of blood, puzzle, it's going to be a big problem. Now, the Gemara, the Brisa then said, all I would know that the pasuk is doubling down on is the application of, is the hazas zayin, right? The sprinkling of blood 7 times by a chatas apnimi, like a par davar shel tzibur, like a par Kohen Mashiach. The blood is sprinkled 7 times before the paroches in the azar, in the heichel. Now, not nazar, in the heichel. Anyways, so we had said, okay, so all I know is that those are ma'akev. How do I know that also the 4 are ma'akev? Anyways, we'll get there in a second. But the point is that the Brisa had pointed out that when it comes to the 7 hazaos, that when it comes to the 7 hazaos, those are ma'akev in every single place. So now going back to our Gemara and Daf Mem, so Amar Mar, Ein li ela matan sheva shematvos b'chol makom heicha. Where are all of these places that we're saying, well, when it comes to the matan sheva, it's always ma'akev in all places? Amar Apape b'paru v'negaim. So it says Apape that this is a reference to Para Aduma, that when it comes to the Para Aduma, when they're burning the Para Aduma on Har HaZeisin, so it says that they would sprinkle the, I think, mechatos, 7, was it the blood or the mechatos? What is it? V'hizel nochach pnei oil moed. What is this? Okay, so from the blood of the Para Aduma, the Kohen would sprinkle the blood 7 times towards the Beis HaMikdash, essentially. Towards it, was it nochach pnei oil moed, towards the Beis HaMikdash 7 times. So all of those sprinklings were ma'akev by the Para Aduma, as well as by tsaras, by part of the purification process of the mitzora. There would be an oil segment, there would be a blood segment, also an oil segment. As part of that oil segment, the kohen would sprinkle from the oil 7 times. All of those sprinklings, all those 7 sprinklings are me'akev. So therefore, when we say that the hazos, that the matan sheva is ma'akev in all places, what are all these places? Para Aduma, mitzora, Matan Arba Minayin. Okay, so then we said, fine. Okay, so we said V'asa Kasher also comes to double down on the Azos, that they're all Ma'akiv, they have to do all of them. We said, okay, that's specifically for the Azos Sheva. How do we know the Azos Arba? So we said, okay, we need another pasuk there. Tamlomer Kein Yaise. Okay, so shall you do. Kein Yaise is coming to teach that the Azos Arba, the Matan Dam of the 4 on the Mizbach HaKetores, that is also Ma'akev. You got to do all 4 by a chatas hapnimi. My shna Matan Zayin dichsiven uchfilim. But now the Gemara asks, 1 second, why did we assume that the Matan Zayin are Ma'akev and not necessarily the Matan Arba? Well, we said, well, okay, because the Matan Zayin, they are written in the parsha of Parlam Davishal Tzibor, and then we double down by saying V'asher Kasher also, to double down and to say that they're Ma'akev. But Matan Dalad Namik Sivan Uchfilan. But the fact of the matter is, it also says by Parlam Davishal Tzibor that you have to apply the blood 4 times on the Mizbeach Aktores, on the Mizbeach Apnimi. Those are the same thing. Also Mizbeach Azov, those are all the same thing. So it says by Parlam Davashal Tzibor that you have to apply the blood to the 4 corners of the Mizbeach HaPnimi, and also Kasher also should double down on that as well. Just like it doubles down on the Matan Zayin, it should also double down on the Matan Daled. So Rabbi Yirmiyah l'nitzcha el Reb Shimon. So it says Rabbi Yirmiyah Taka, you're right. However, the reason why we needed to learn from Kein Yase and we couldn't just learn from V'asa Kasher also is specifically according to the Shita of Reb Shimon. The sign that we learned about is Lamaila Omer Keren Kronos Shtaim, Lamata Omer Keren Kronos Arba. That it says Kronos by Par Kohen Mashiach. It also says Kronos. Say Kronos or Karnos? Karnos. Okay. It says Karnos by, and where's the other pasuk? Beis Gimel. Karnos. Okay, it says Karnos by Par Kohen Mashiach. It says Karnos by Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibor. Karnos is plural. Minimum of plural is 2. If I understand correctly, the point is that actually according to Reb Shimon, look, it says 2 by Par Kohen Mashiach. It says 2 Kranos by Parlam Davashal Tzibor. 2 plus 2 is 4, but it doesn't actually say 4 straight out by Parlam Davashal Tzibor. It only says 2, and you add it to the 2 from Par Kohen Mashiach. And therefore it doesn't actually, meaning, so if the argument was, well, it already says the Matan Arba by Parlam Davashal Tzibor, and then it doubles down on it, it actually doesn't say the Matan Arba by Parlam Davar Shel Tzibor. It only says 2 of them. So again, Titani Lamaila Omer, it says by Par Kohen Mashiach Karen, Kainos. It could have said Karen, but it says Kainos, which is plural. Shtaim, Lemato Omer. It also says by Palam Davash Tzibur Karen Kainos. Right? It says Kronos, which is plural. Arba, so 2 plus 2 is 4. The Reb Shimon, that's Reb Shimon's opinion. Reb Yehuda Omer, Einu Tzarech, Harei Omer, Be'oil Moyed. Al Kol Omer Be'oil Moyed. Reb Yehuda learns it differently. He says that no. Reb Yehuda says that when it says by the Par Elam Dover Shel Tzibur, what does it say by Par Elam Dover Shel Tzibur? It says, I'm going to read the pasuk. Umin Adam Yiten Al Karnos HaMizbeach. So the blood you'll place on the corners of the Mizbeach. Asher Lifnei Hashem. That's before Hashem. What's the Mizbeach that's before Hashem? The Mizbeach HaPnimi in the Heichel. Asher Ba'oil Moed. That's in Oil Moed. The shaila is one second. Why? The truth is, later on we're going to ask about why it has to mention the Mizbeach also. But anyway, we'll get there a little bit later. But it says Asher Lifnei Hashem, that which is before Hashem in the Heichel. So we already know that we're talking about the Mizbeach and the Heichel. Why does it then need to say Asher Ba'oil Moed? That's in the Oil Moed. That seems to be extra. So Rabbi Yehuda learns out from the seemingly extra Asher Ba'oil Moed to learn Al Kol Amr Ba'oil Moed, that all of the corners and all the entirety of the Mizbeach and all. How does Rashi say? That in all of the corners that are in the Heichel, right? When it says Asher Ba'oil Moed, everything in the Oil Moed, all of the corners need to get some blood love. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says, look, so meaning Reb Shimon had learned that it says Kronos by Par Kol Mashiach, and it says Kronos by Par Davash Tzibur 2 and 2, that's 4. Reb Yehuda says that actually by Par Davash Tzibur, it says that you need all 4 corners of the Mizbeach, because it already says Lifnei Hashem, which is talking about the Heichel. So why does it say Asher Ba'oil Moed? It's saying that all of the corners in the Oil Moed need to get some blood love, need to have Matan Damim on them. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it says all 4 corners. According to Rabbi Shimon, it doesn't. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you don't need Kain Yaiseh, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, just like there's the Matan Sheva and then it doubles down on it, there's also the Matan Arba and it doubles down on it when it says V'asa Kasher also. According to Rabbi Shimon, it doesn't say the 4 specifically by the Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, and therefore you need the additional Kain Yaiseh to teach that the 4 matanos are taka ma'akev. You got to do all 4. Rabbi Yehuda Kain Yaiseh my overlay. Oh, okay. So if Rabbi Yehuda doesn't therefore need Kain Yaiseh to double down on the matanos, because apparently according to Rabbi Yehuda, since it already says for all the 4 corners by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, so we could simply learn out from V'asa Kasher also that the all 4 are ma'akev. So what does he do with Kain Yaiseh? He needs for the following Braise lefisha lo lamanu lepar Yom Kippurim l'smicha v'shari adam minayin. Well, by the Par Yom Kippurim, by the cow that the Kohen Gadol offers on Yom Kippur, in part of the blood is offered in the Kodesh HaKodashim. That's the cow that we're talking about. It does not say there that smicha must be done leaning on the cow, nor does it say that the remainders of the shirayim of the blood is spilled on the yesod of the mizbech. It doesn't say these things. So how do we know that this is in fact the case? Talmud Omer Kain Yaiseh. Therefore, it says Kain Yaiseh. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Kain Yaiseh teaches that also by Par Yom Kippurim, and we're going to learn in a minute, maybe a few minutes. I think maybe less than a minute, whatever it is, we're going to learn shortly that this pasuk by Par Davar Shel Tzibur is also a reference to the Par Yom Kippurim as well. So anyways, Kain Yaiseh, in the context of the Par Davar Shel Tzibur, is also teaching about the Par Yom Kippurim, that just like by Par Davar Shel Tzibur, the psukim say that the Kohen needs to do smicha, and also the shirayim are poured on the yesod of the mizbeach. The same is the halacha by the Par Yom Kippurim. So Talmud Omer Kain Yaiseh. U'lepar Yom Kippurim lo lamadnu. Ha'omar lepar ze Par Yom Kippurim. There you go. But the Gemara says, one second. When the pasuk says lepar ze Par Yom Kippurim, that when the pasuk says v'aso lepar kasher also lepar, So it's unclear exactly which lipar. It says lapar, it says lipar, it says one of them. I don't know, let's say the second one. He's talking, one of the lipars there are talking about par Yom HaKippurim. So the pasuk is already including par Yom HaKippurim, so why don't we just say that by including par Yom HaKippurim, it includes all of the halachas of the par Yom Davashal Tzibor, apply also to the par Yom HaKippurim, including smicha and shiare, right, and the shiraim. And the shiare adam, that they have to be poured on the yisod. So why do I need ken yaisa to teach me smicha and shiraim for a par Yom HaKippurim? I should simply just know that because lapar is coming to include par Yom HaKippurim, so all the halachas of par Yom Davashal Tzibor should apply, including smicha and shiare adam. It's drich. No, I need ken yaisa because otherwise I would have thought Hanemile, that when we say lapar to include par Yom HaKippurim and to include it in the halachis of par Yom Davashal Tzibor, avoda de ma'akva kapara, I may have thought vis-a-vis avodas that are ma'akev kapara. And we're gonna learn about those soon. What exactly we're talking about. But avodas that are ma'akev kapara. But something like smicha or shvichas shiraim on the yisod mizbeach, if those things weren't done, the korban is still kosher. So I may not have known to say that smicha and the shiare adam apply to the par Yom HaKippurim as well, because the inclusion in par Yom Davashal Tzibor, I might assume, would only refer to the avodas that are ma'akev kapara, that if you neglect to do them, the korban is possible. However, things like smicha and shiare adam maybe would not apply to the par Yom HaKippurim. Therefore, I need say malo. I might say that they wouldn't apply to the par Yom HaKippurim kamash malan. Therefore, the pasuk says ken yaisa to say that also smicha and shiare adam apply to the par Yom HaKippurim as well. Reb Shimon had oil moed me'avidlei. So Reb Yehuda had learned that from oil moed that includes all the corners of the mizbeach and the oil moed. What does Reb Shimon learn from oil moed? Ba'oil moed mi ba'ile she'im nifchasa tikra shel heichol lo haya mazeh. What Reb Shimon learns out from ba'oil moed is that it has to be an oil moed. It has to be a tent. A tent has a roof. If the ceiling of the heichol caves in, such that it's no longer covered, and therefore it's not an oil, it's not a tent anymore, so then you would not do the matan damim of the chatas apnimi. Right, again, shem nifchasa tikra shel heichol, that if the roof of the heichol caved in, lo haya mazeh, you would not apply the blood to the mizbeach pnimi. Ve'idach, how does Rabbi Yehuda know that halacha? So very, very interesting. Very interesting, friends. Listen up. You know how Rabbi Yehuda knows that halacha? The same way that Rabbi Shimon knows the halacha. From oil moed. Wait, didn't oil moed teach all the corners of the mizbeach that are in the oil moed according to Rabbi Yehuda? So actually he learns it out from Asher. Okay? That if you look at the pasuk, by par Yom Davashal Tzibor, I'm going to read you the pasuk. It says, "Umin Adam yiten al kainos hamizbeach asher lifnei Hashem asher ba'oil moed." That second asher is superfluous. It could have just said asher lifnei Hashem ba'oil moed. What's asher ba'oil moed? The extra asher, Rabbi Yehuda learns from there all of the four corners, and from oil moed he learns out that it has to be a tent. If the roof caves in, you wouldn't do the matan damim. So he learns from oil moed just like Reb Shimon does. However, from Asher ba'oil moed, from the extra Asher, Reb Yehuda learns out that the blood must be applied to all four corners. Ve'idach and Reb Shimon Asher lo darish. Reb Shimon does not learn out anything from, he doesn't have a drasha for, he doesn't say that, Reb Shimon doesn't hold that there's anything special to be learned out from Asher. Okay. So now this assumed, okay, doing like a shtickle check-in over here. So we had said initially that if, anyways, by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, it says that the blood must be applied to all four corners, and it says V'asa Kasher Asa, so that should already be serving to double down on the requirement of the four Matan Damim to say that they are required. Why do I need Ken Yaisa? We said Taka, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you don't need Ken Yaisa because he learns from, as ultimately we said, Asher Ba'oil Moed, that by the Parim Davar Shel Tzibur it includes all four Matan Damims, and therefore V'asa Kasher Aser says that it's required. And from Ken Yaisa he learns out for something by the Yom Kippur. We said when we need Ken Yaisa to double down on the Matan Damim, that's specifically according to Reb Shimon's opinion, because Reb Shimon learns out 2 from Par Kohen Mashiach and 2 from Parim Davar Shel Tzibur. And therefore he says by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur it doesn't actually say the 4, so you need Ken Yaisa to double down. Comes Abaye to say that actually the doubling down of Ken Yaisa is also necessary for Rabbi Yehuda as well, not just for Reb Shimon. Abaye Omer says, Abaye, Rabbi Yehuda Nami, I also need Ken Yaisa, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, who learns out from Asher all 4 Matan Damim by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, I still need Ken Yaisa. Sagadate Chamino, I may have thought that when the pasuk says V'asa Kasher Asa and it's doubling down, it may have only been things midahava asmicha v'shari adam davagav dechsivan uchvilon lo me'akva matan arba nami lo tisakev kamash malon. The thing is, if the whole idea of saying that V'asa Kasher Asa would apply to anything that was already listed and it doubled down on, right? So therefore we're saying, for example, the Matan Zayin, right? The 7 applications of the blood, it was written by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, and it says V'asa Kasher Asa to double down and say that they're required. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it says all right, the Arba Matanos on the Mizbeach HaPnimi. But even so, V'asa Kasher Asa wouldn't necessarily be doubling down on those 4 to say that they're required. How come? Well, because what else does it say by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur? It says Smicha by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur. It says Shari Adam need to be spilled on the Yisod HaMizbeach by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur. And yet, when it says V'asa Kasher Asa, it doesn't double down on those. If you didn't do Smicha, if you didn't do Shari Adam, the korban is still kosher. How come V'asa Kasher Asa doesn't apply to Smicha, doesn't apply to Shari Adam? Because Smicha and Shari Adam are be'etzem things that if you left them out, it would still be kosher. What is that? Smicha Shari Adam, that even though they're written, they are makiv. So I may have thought that also Matan Damim, even though they're written, they're not me'akev. Right at the end of the daf yesterday, we learned, if you go back to Lamed Testament Beis, about 6 lines from Lamed, it says V'chiper afal pishlo somach v'nislach afal pishlo nosan shirayim. Right, so we know that even that by the Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, even though Smicha and Shari Adam were written there, V'asa Kasher Asa doesn't say that they are actually required. So I may have thought that by the Matan Arba, which by a chatas achitzon, you don't have to do all 4. 1 is enough. So I may have thought that maybe the doubling down doesn't apply to the Matan Arba. So therefore, Kamash Malon, right? So I'm going to read that again. So Amar Abaye, the Buddha Nami Itzuk Kasagadati Chamino, Mididava Smicha V'Sharedam, Avagad Dichsivan Uchvin Loma Akvan, Matan Arba Nami Lo Tesakev, Kamash Malon. I may have thought that also the Matan Dalid maybe wouldn't be Ma'akev. You don't have to do all 4 of them. Kamash Malon, Ken Yaisa, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's necessary to teach that also the Matan Dalid, the applications, the 4 applications of blood must be done in their entirety. Friends, now we move on to the next section of today's daf, the Yom Kippur cow requirements. We already had started talking about them. Now we're going to kind of drill down. Says the Gemara, Lapar Zepar Yom Kippurim, that when the pasuk says Lapar, I'm going to assume that is talking about the first Lapar. I don't know. Whatever. Why not? Zepar Yom Kippur. This is a reference to the Par Yom Kippurim. The truth is, I can actually look at it. Let me see if the art scroll makes the distinction clear. 1 second. Okay, so actually the article says lapar. Great. So that means it's the first one because the pasuk says also lapar, kasher also lipar. So lapar is the first one. Fine. Lapar ze Yom Kippurim. This is a reference to the par of Yom Kippur. For what halachis are we including the cow of Yom Kippur by the par elim dover shel tzibur? If it's to say that you got to do all of the matan dam, that you have to apply all of the blood. Pshita, chuka ksiva. Of course, you have to apply all of the blood to the cow of Yom Kippur. It says by the cow of Yom Kippur, chuka, that this is the rule, this is the law. When it says chuka, it means you got to do all of it. So chuka is ksiva bey. So Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak leNitzchak ela Rabbi Yehuda de Omar ki ksiva chuka advar manaisim bevigdei lovim befnim shemikte ma'aser lechaver lo'asav lo klum aval dvar manaisim bevigdei lovim bachutz hikte ma'aser lechaver ma'ashasa also ema mide kesidron le'makve azos nami lo'makve kamashman. Chaver, you got that? Good. Should we go weiter? So interestingly, normally when we say bachutz, bifnim and bachutz, often it's a reference to bifnim would be like the azar, and bachutz would be outside of the azar. Interestingly here, because we're talking about the avodah on Yom Kippur, bifnim is talking about in the kodesh hakodashim, bachutz is talking about in the heichel. Or no, sorry, I guess normally, I don't even know, but I guess bachutz and bifnim is just, I guess, relative. Right, I think what I actually meant to say is normally when we say bifnim, I think it means in the heichel, and bachutz would mean the azar. Right? For example, the Mizbeach HaPnimi is in the Heichal. The Mizbeach HaChitzon is in the Azar. But over here, when we're talking about Bifnim, we're talking about Lifnai v'Lifnim. We're talking about in the Kodesh HaKodashim. So again, Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, the reason why we need Lapar to include Par Yom Kippurim is, L'Rabbi Yehuda, for Rabbi Yehuda the Amar, who says, Ki ksiva chuka, that when the pasuk says chuka, i.e., that this is the law, it's laying down the law, it must be done this way. Advarim anaisim b'vigdei lovim b'fnim. So says Rabbi Yehuda, chuka is a reference to the avodas that are done while the Kohen Gadol is adorned in the white garments and doing the avodah inside the Kodesh HaKodashim. Shem hiktim ma'aseh lechaver lo'asav lo klum. If he did the avodas out of order, then it's no good. It's possible. So to those avodas, right? So for example, if he did, for example, if the Ketoris was done before the Matanos Adam between the poles of the Arun, right? So there's the avodah of the Ketoris, the sprinkling of the blood in the Kodesh HaKodashim. If those were done out of order, so then that's a problem. So chuka applies there. Aval dvar manaisim bevigdei lovan bachutz. However, the avodas that were done in the white garments bachutz, in the heichel, for example, right, the sprinkling of the blood by the paroches and by the mizbach hazov, hiktim ma'aseh lechaveru masha also. If you did the avodas out of order, it's not me'akev there. So ema midik kesidron lo me'akve. So I may have had the Havamina to say that, well, when it comes to the azos, the sprinklings of the blood in the heichel, if they're done out of order, they're not ma'akev. So it sounds like there's a chink in the armor of chukah. It sounds like chukah doesn't apply, at least to certain aspects of the avoda in the heichel. So azos nami lo ma'akve. I may have thought that also the applications of the blood in the heichel are not ma'akev. So Kamash Malan, so it's saying that, so therefore we need Lapar to include the Par Yom Kippurim to say that the applications of blood are in fact me akev. Maskef for a papa says me matzah samad hachi. 1 second, is that really true that we need Lapar to teach that according to Rabbi Yehuda the Matan Damim is ma'akev? I wouldn't have known that otherwise. But we learn about it says by the avodah of Yom Kippur, it says that the kohen v'chila mikaper sakodesh, she completed doing the kapara, and the drasha is im kiper kila v'im lo kiper lo kila de Rabbi Kiva. It says Rabbi Kiva, if he did the kapara, if he did the matan damim, he did everything properly. so then there's a kapara. If he didn't do all the matan damim, then there's no kapara. Rabbi Yehuda responds to Rabbi Akiva, Mipnei ma lo nomar, why don't we say, Im kilo kiper, v'im lo kilo lo kiper. Kilu, what does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, V'chila mikaper es hakodesh. The pasuk says first kila and then kiper. Rabbi Yehuda's drasha was the opposite. He inverted it. If he did the kapara, so then he's done. Right? Im kiper kila. If he did all the proper kaparas, then he's done. If he didn't do all the proper kaparas, then he's not done. So he's preceding kiper to kila. But Rabbi Yehuda suggests, why don't we just keep it in the order of the pasuk that im kila kiper. If he completed all of the avodas, including the pouring of the shiarei adam on the yesod, even kiper, then there's a kapara. Lo kila, if he didn't do all of the avodas, even including pouring the shiraim on the yesod from the mizbech, lo kiper, there's no kapara. So the point being, what's the point? What's the question? The question is that the machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda seems to simply be around, does it also include the shiarei adam? But everyone agrees, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Akiva agree that you would have to do all of the matan damim, all of the applications of the blood. So Rabbi Yehuda already learns out from this pasuk of v'chila mikaper es hakodesh that all of the matan damim is ma'akeh. So it's not learned out from lapar by Parlam Davar Shel Tzibur. Amar Pape rather says Rav Papa lo nitzcha elo le'es badam utvila. This is going to be coming up, I believe tomorrow as well, maybe even the day after, I don't remember. So es badam utvila. Es, badam, and tvila are three words, and they are a reference to three halachas. Es, badam, utvila. Says Rav Papa that is what Lapar is teaching, that es, badam, utvila apply to par Yom Kippurim. Es, Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov l'nitzcha lahachshir amin shebe'etzba, that if we look at the pasuk by Parlam Davar Shel Tzibur, it says v'tavel hakohen es etzbo. Es etzbo means afilu mashetofel etzbo. Even if he has some kind of a blister on his finger, it is okay by the Parlam Davar Shel Tzibur, and it's okay by the par Yom Kippurim as well. Badam, when it says v'tavel, it says bo badam. Sheyeh badam shir tvila me'ikara, that already from the beginning, from the time that the blood was received in the vessel, enough blood must have been received in the vessel milichatchila, that there would be enough to dip one's fingers into, the kohen's fingers into. Not that there was not enough initially and then you added to it or something. It would have to be milichatchila, enough to dip your fingers into. V'toval v'lo misapeg, he dips his fingers into the blood, not just if there was like blood on the sides, he can't scoop that up. He's got to dip his fingers into the blood. We need, the pasuk needed to write badam because of achmana v'toval, because if we would only have v'toval to dip, hava amina afagav deleka shir tvila meikara. To dip means as long as there's enough right now to dip in, but it wouldn't teach me that milchatchila at the time of Kabbalas Adam there would already have to be received enough to dip in. So therefore I need badam because of achmana badam. Therefore it says badam to teach milchatchila meikara. There needs to be enough blood to dip your fingers into because of achmana badam. And if the Torah said badam, but didn't say tvila, I might think that you can even scoop up the blood from the sides of the vessel. Because of achmana v'tavel, no, you got to dip your fingers in. So those are the halachas that are being learned from, says Rav Papa, those are the halachas, es, badam, utvila, that is what's being learned. And again, remember those three words, es, badam, utvila, it's going to be coming up. That es, badam, utvila is what's learned from Parlam Davar Shel Tzibur to par Yom Kippur. So now the pasuk says Mizbach Ketor Sam. This is actually the pasuk by Par Kohen Mashiach. And the truth is actually, now that I'm looking at it, the previous pasuk as well, the Es Badam Utvila, also is by the Par Kohen Mashiach. However, there is a link between the Par Kohen Mashiach and the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur, because it says V'asisa lapar kashrasa lapar, right? You'll do by the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur just like you did by the Par Kohen Mashiach. So there's a link between the Par Kohen Mashiach and the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur, and then there's also a link from the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur to the Par Yom Kippur, which we're going to learn more about moving ahead. But anyways, so this pasuk that I'm reading right now, that says Mizbach Ketor Samim. What does it say? Mizbach, I think Mizbach. So the pasuk, okay, by par kohen Mashiach. It says, "V'nosan hakohen es Adam al karnos mizbach ketoras hasam." The shaila is, why does it have to say mizbach ketoras hasam? Because after all, we had learned earlier that when it says lifnei Hashem asher be'oil moed, and we said oil moed means all of the corners of the mizbeach that's in the oil moed. So why do I have to say mizbach ketoras hasam? We already know that you have to apply the blood to the mizbeach that's in the oil moed. So mizbach ketoras hasam lomali sheim loy nischanech hamizbeach b'ketoras hasam loya maze. What if the kohen Mashiach the Kohen Gadol had to bring a par Kohen Mashiach, but the Mizbach HaKetoras didn't yet have any Ketoras ever burnt on it. It wasn't yet Nischanich, it didn't yet have its maiden voyage, its maiden Ketoras burn. So what does it say? It says, Mizbach lo hayamazeh. Right? If the Kohen Gadol, this is a halacha that I guess would be specific to literally the brand new Mizbach HaKetoras, but if the Kohen Gadol had to bring a par Kohen Mashiach, and the Mizbach HaKetoras had not yet ever had Ketoras burnt on it, the Kohen Gadol would not do Matan Damim on that Mizbach. He would wait until after Ketoras had been burnt on it. Says the Gemara, Tanya Kavos to a papa that we have a brisa supporting a papa. A papa had said that Badam is coming to teach by a par Yom Kippurim es Badam. La par is coming to teach by Par Yom Kippurim as Badam Utvila. So we have a brisa supporting that notion. Tanakavos to Papa also kasher also Matam Lomar La par. Why does it say La par Lerabos Par Yom Kippurim to include the Par Yom HaKippurim? Right, when it says La par, it's to include the Par Yom Kippurim. L'chol ma she'omer ba'inyan. For all the halachos, including es badam utvila divrei Rabbi. It says divrei Rabbi. There's other girsos. There's other girsos that say Rabbi Akiva. There's a whole machlokes. Is it Rabbi Akiva? Is it Rabbi? I think Rabbi Akiva makes sense because he's arguing with Rabbi Shmuel. But anyways, I'm going to go with Rabbi Akiva. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I'm just going to go with Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rabbi Shmuel says Rabbi Yishmael kal v'chomer. So Rabbi Shmuel says So Rabbi Shmuel does learn out that es ba'adam utvila applies to par Yom Kippurim. However, he doesn't learn it out from la par. He learns it out from a kal v'chomer, which we're going to dig into in a few minutes. Not immediately. We're going to mention the kal v'chomer, but we're not going to explain it for another few minutes. So Amar Rabbi Yishmael kal v'chomer uma b'makom shelo hushva korban lekorban hushva maisim lemaisim. This is going to require explanation, which the Gemara will explain, but not yet. That if in a scenario where the korbanos are not the same, shelo hushva korban lekorban, where the korbanos are not the same, one is a cow and the other is a goat, hishve maisim lemaisim, and nonetheless the actions are the same, es badam utvila, makom she hishva korban lekorban. So then certainly in a place where the korbanos are the same, like by par lam davar shel tzibor and par Yom Kippurim, they're both cows, enodin she yishve maise lemaise, certainly the actions, the avodas should have to be the same, and the halachos would be the same, and just like there's es badam utvila by par lam davar shel tzibor, the same would be by the par Yom Kippurim. Ela matam lomer la par. So if that's the case, that we can learn out es badam utvila using a kal v'chomer, then why does the pasuk say la par? Ze par helim davar shel tzibor. Interesting. So says Rabbi Shmuel that la par is a reference to the par helim davar shel tzibor. Now you might be thinking, wait a second, but the pasuk is by a par helim davar shel tzibor. Why do we need la par to include par helim davar shel tzibor? Already talking. This is a pasuk written that's talking about a par helim davar shel tzibor. Why does it have to include itself? So that we're going to get to that tomorrow. La par is a par kohen Mashiach, and the lipar, right? When it says la par, it's par helim davar shel tzibor. When it says lipar, it's par kohen Mashiach. But none of them are a reference to the par Yom HaKippurim, according to Rabbi Shmuel. Omer Mar, we're now going to drill down on that kal v'chomer that we mentioned. That if in a scenario where the animals are different, yet they have the same halachos. Certainly when the animals are the same, they have the same halachos. What is the scenario where the animals are different, and it's a chiddush that even though the animals are different, well, they still have the same halachos, and it's like, wow, that's such a big chiddush. So when we say that they have different animals, my love, hushve, korban the korban, my lo hushve korban the korban. What is this scenario where the korbanos are different, where the animals are different? Ilema par Yom Kippurim v'sa'ir Yom Kippurim. If we're going to say, well, on Yom Kippur, you have the cow, the Yom Kippur cow, that is mechaper for the kohen, for the kohanim, and the Yom Kippur goat, that is mechaper for the rest of Am Yisrael. So you have a cow and you have a goat, and yet all of the halachas are the same in terms of the blood, Kodesh HaKodoshim, Heichal, all the Matam Damim. So even though they're different animals, they have all the same halachas. But we could say, okay, but it makes sense that they have all the same halachas. On Yom Kippur, you have the Par Yom Kippurim, the Sar Yom Kippurim. There's a huge chiddush that those are the only examples the entire year that korbanos are, that part of the avodas of the korban is done in the Kodesh HaKodashim. It's not surprising that they also have the same halachas. They are unique in that sense that they are the only examples of korbanos that the avodah is done, that there's avodah done in the Kodesh HaKodashim. So it's not such a chiddush that it's not like we're taking two random things and saying they have the same halachas. Okay, so maybe it's talking about a par elam davar shel tzibur and a sa'ir avodas kochavim. An avodas kochavim goat, if Am Yisrael did avodah zarah and they have to bring a goat. So you have a cow and you have a goat and they have the same halachas, right? They're both, where we had learned, I think yesterday as well, we learned that from chatas. Yeah, in the second line of Daf Yomi Zevachim is that a chatas elu seir avodas kochavim, that we include seir avodas kochavim with the same halachas as the par davar shel tzibur. So we have a par davar shel tzibur and a sa'ir avodah zarah, and they have the same halachas. We can ask, Malanach shekem mechapen ala veiras mitzvah yedua. Okay, but I could ask a question and say, look, when it comes to the par davar shel tzibur and the seir avodah zarah, they are both coming for mitzvahs that, right, they're both coming for averas that we know what they are and we know that they've been transgressed. So therefore, okay, to say that the par davar shel tzibur and the seir avodah zarah, even though one's a cow and the other one is a goat, they have the same halachas because they're both coming for averas where we know that the avera was done, as opposed to the par Yom Kippurim, where the par Yom Kippurim is mechaper for Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashav, as we learned in the first Mishnah of Masechta Shavuos, Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashav, when there was ein b'yediyah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof. When the person, let's say you have a person who's tamei, and he accidentally went into the Beis HaMikdash, and he had no clue that he didn't realize that he was tamei at the time that he went to the Beis HaMikdash, and he never realized after the fact that, oh, I was tamei when I went to the Beis HaMikdash. The par of Yom Kippurim is mechaper for that. So I can understand why, right, the similarity between the par elam davar shel tzibur and the seir avodah zarah, that they would have the same halachos, because they're both coming for, even though one's a cow and the other one's a goat, they're both coming for averas that we know that they've been committed. Masha ein kain, to make a parallel between par elam davar shel tzibur and par Yom Kippurim, where the par Yom Kippurim is coming for averas where ein b'idea lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof. Ela par elam davar shel tzibur v'sa'ir shel Yom Kippurim. Rather, if we take a look at the par elam davar shel tzibur and the sa'ir of Yom Kippurim, so one's a cow, the other one's a goat. This is what we're saying. So obviously they're going to have different, they're not going to have all the same halachas. The sa'ir Yom Kippurim, there's a part of the avodah that's done in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Obviously, that's not going to be the case by the par elam davar shel tzibur. However, this is what it's saying. Here we have a scenario where the animals are different. That the par elam davar shel tzibur is a cow and the sar Yom Kippur is a goat. Nonetheless, Hushvu maisim lemaisim lemai dechosabu. In the, at least in with regard to the halachos that they share in common, in terms of doing the azaos on the paroches and the matan domim on the mizbeach apnimi, on the mizbeach hazav. So they have the same halachos with regard to that. So with regard to the halachos that they do share in common, there's no differences there. So one's a goat, one's a cow, but with regard to at least what they have, it's not like there's something unique by one that doesn't apply to the other in terms of the halachos that do apply. Like it's not like in one case they're ma'akev, in the other case not ma'akev. The halach with regard to the things that they share in common, they're exactly the same. Right, so meaning obviously we're not talking about the avodah in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, because that doesn't apply to Parim Davar Shatzibur. But with regard to like the avodas in the Heichel, they're identical. So Makom She'ushvu Korban LeKorban. So now, if we're looking at the Parim Davar Shatzibur and the Par Yom Kippurim, where they're both cows, the high par, v'high par, they're both cows. Enodin She'ushvu Maisim LeMaisim. So then certainly the halach is by where they're both cows. The halach is by Par Yom Davar Shatzibur, and Par Yom Kippurim should be the same for Es Badam U Tvila. V'also le Par Yom Kippurim le Es Badam U Tvila mi Par Kohen Mashiach. So ultimately, because as I pointed out earlier, that actually that pasuk of right, Es Badam, right? The Es Badam Utvila is by the Par Kohen Mashiach, and there's a link between Par Kohen Mashiach and Par Elam Davar Shatzibur, and then of course through La Par, there's a link between Par Elam Davar Shatzibur and Par Yom Kippurim. So ultimately, through the linkage, Par Yom Kippurim is learned out for Es Badam Utvila from Par Kohen Mashiach. So again, so v'also lei Par Yom Kippurim. So Par Yom Kippurim is learnt out le'ez badam utvila mi Par Kohen Mashiach. Ultimately, via Par Elam Davar Shatzibur to the Par Kohen Mashiach, and ez badam utvila for Par Yom Kippurim is learned out from Par Kohen Mashiach. V'osi lei Sa'ir Yom Kippurim, and then the Sa'ir of Yom Kippurim is learned out misirei avodas kochav mikal v'chomer. And then the Sa'ir of Yom Kippur for Ez Badam Utvila is learnt out from Sirei Avodas Kochavim Mikava Chomer. From the Sirei Avodas Kochavim through a Kava Chomer. And then the Golos V'Tzion actually spells out what the Kava Chomer is, which is Uma b'makom shelo ushvu korban lekorban, the high parvai Sa'ir, that in the scenario where the korbanos were different, right, Parim Davar Shatzibur and Seir Avodas Seir Yom Kippurim. Hishve Maisim LeMaisim LeMai. We said that nonetheless, with regard to the Matan Domim the Heichol, they have the same exact halachis. So Malkum Shehushve Korban LeKorban. So if we're talking about the Seir Avodas Zarah and the Seir Yom Kippurim, where it's the same korban, they're both goats. The high Seir v'high Seir, they're both goats. Enodin Shehushvu Maisim LeMaisim. So certainly they should have the same halachas. And just like Ez Badam Utvila applies to the Seir Avodah Zarah, it also applies to the Sa'ir Yom Kippurim. Fact the Gemara, but 1 second. How do we know by the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah Ez Badam Utvila? Well, because the pasuk had said, as we said at the end of the daf yesterday, chatas, and from the word chatas by Palam Davar Shatzibur, we come to include Sa'ir Avodah Zarah through extension. So it's only learned out from the juxtaposition from the inclusion in that pasuk by Palam Davar Shatzibur. It doesn't say explicitly Ez Badam Utvila by Seirei Avodah Zarah. The truth is, right, meaning, so it says chatos by Seir by Palam Davar Shatzibur to include Seir Avodah Zarah, and Ez Badam Utvila is really by Par Kohen Mashiach. So you have Par Kohen Mashiach teaching to Seir to Par Palam Davar Shatzibur. From Palam Davar Shatzibur, we're then including the Seir Avodah Zarah, and then we're saying that from the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah, which is via Palam Davar Shatzibur, via right to Par Kohen Mashiach, we're then applying that to the Sa'ir Yom Kippurim. Is it possible that the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah, which it itself doesn't explicitly say Es Badam Utvila. It's only learned out through the pasuk by Parlam Davish Tzibur. Choser Melamed B'Kav Chomer. Can that then go and be the source of a Kav Chomer to teach that by Sar Yom Kippurim as Badam Tefillah applies? Amar Papa Kasavatana Deveri Bishmal Tavalam Be'akish Choser Melamed B'Kav Chomer. Says Papa that according to Tana Deveri Bishmal, who and Rabbi Shmuel is the one teaching this Kav Chomer. Yes, even something learned out from a Kav Chomer, even something I learned out from a Hekesh, such as in this case the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah by Es Badam Tefillah, can still be used in a Kav Chomer to then teach that by Sa'ir Yom Kippurim Es Badam Tefillah would apply. Friends, that was Daf Mem Aleph. No, that was Daf Mem of Masechta Zevachim. Alright, friends, so on Daf Mem of Masechta Zevachim, we learned the 4 required bloods for inner chatas, right? That the matan dam of a chatas apnimi, you have to do all 4 of them. Rabbi Yirmiyah, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah, only Rabbi Shimon learns that from the words kain yaise. According to Rabbi Yirmiyah would say that Rabbi Yehuda would say that from v'asa kasher also, we would learn that the 4 matanos are me'akev, because he already learns the 4 from Oel Moed. According to Rabbi Shimon, who says that we learn 2 by Parko Mashiach and 2 by Parlam Davish Tzibur, he needs Kain Yaise to teach that the 4 are ma'akev. According to Abaye, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda need learn from Kain Ya'aset. The Yom Kippur cow requirements. Okay, obviously the blood is going to be required. All the matan dam on Yom Kippur you have to do. From the words, was this Es Badam? Okay, okay, fine. So we had said that La Par, Rav Papa had said that La Par is coming to teach that by Par Yom Kippurim, the requirements of Es Badam Utvila apply. Es being that even if the Kohen has a blister on his hands, that's fine. Badam means that the blood has to be received me'ikara, initially in a vessel with enough of the blood there to be able to dip your finger into it. And Tvila means that you have to dip your hands in, you can't just wipe it off the sides of the vessel. So Rabbi Akiva learns that out from the word lapar. Rabbi Shmuel learns it out from a Kav Chomer, but everyone agrees that the halachos of Es Badam Utvila would apply to the Par of Yom Kippurim. Chaver, that was Daf Mem of Masechta Zevachim. Hope you enjoyed. Cheers.